Okay, can everybody hear me okay? Should be good to go here. All right. So there should be a chat room here. Hey Thomas, how you doing, man? If you guys can you guys hear me? If you can hear me, just give me a. Can you hear me? Go ahead and just kind of reply in the chat box real quick, just to make sure you can hear me. Perfect. Thanks. All right. So, if you guys have questions, this is kind of the first of our our efforts. Really, going to be every month to do a live event like this to really, just expand our community. We have a lot more members online that work with us, kind of all over the world. So, this is kind of our goal is to really increase interaction between everybody who comes here in Raleigh, but also everybody around the world. So. We're going to do different topics every month. We'll have different people on the team kind of presenting on different topics. Today we're going to talk a lot about the body swing connection, and I'm actually going to share with you one that I did actually for the PJ Carolina section, and talking obviously in a way that's applicable to you guys as golfers. So pretty informal is the goal here. So as you guys have questions, just fire away in the chat box, and we'll answer as we go. So kind of the goals for today, kind of the next 45 minutes or so, is just understand kind of what the common physical limitations are that we see, that a lot of you have. And then also understand the kinematic sequence. We'll talk about kind of the graphs, which some of you guys hopefully have some context on already. The way to screen golfers. So I'm going to just kind of talk about some of the basic tests we do, or that you guys have done, explain kind of why we do them, the relationships of how those relate to club head speed, and then just also kind of going through, we'll play a little game in terms of what's golfish versus real golf performance, and then kind of just talking about some things to think about if you are the medically complex, have some issues that obviously complicate, that tends to happen for any golfer over 40, and then we'll talk about some junior considerations too. So kind of just a brief overall understanding how body limitations can affect golf swing in terms of over the top or swaying or sliding, any of those sorts of situations. And obviously, if you have specific things that are going on in your swing, the goal be we can chat about those as we go too. So this is the list of the big 10 swing faults that we tend to see. We're going to go through each one of them with kind of a picture of each so you can kind of understand what they are. But basically, we'll just kind of go fault by fault here, just so you can kind of understand what they are, identify if you have them, and we'll go from there. So the first one is going to be address posture. So you can see here there's S or C posture, generally speaking. So S posture, you see the guy on the left. He will have, in the red shirt, he's going to have kind of a big arch in his low back. C postures, the guy in the red all the way to the right. He kind of looks like he's I always call it like old man back, very curved over. And then you have a guy with kind of a straight spine angle in the middle in the blue shirt. So when we talk about getting into posture, we talk a lot about hinging versus being more kind of rounded. The more hinged we can get with a kind of more relatively straight spine angle, generally that's going to set you up to use the ground a little bit better, drive more from the hips, those sorts of things. So everybody's anatomically a little bit different. You're not necessarily going to, everybody isn't going to fit into the guy in the blue shirt. But really looking at, when we look at the other physical limitations, how you set up can impact in terms of how much or how little those other ones that we'll talk about coming up will play a role in terms of performance. Then the second one, reverse spine angle. So if you look at the guy in the blue here, he is kind of tilted away from the target. If you look at that red line, so his head is further away from the target than his hips. If you look at the guy in the red, his head is more towards the target. So we'll see the guy in the red, we'll see that when hips are tight, or any of the four rotary centers are tight, so hips, thoracic spine, shoulders, neck, we'll tend to see that, or you kind of stand up out of posture. And then unfortunately what that then leads to is, as somebody comes down, if they're up here, we're going to get a big side bend to the right side in a right-handed golfer, to the left side in a left-handed golfer, and that causes lots of low back issues. So being able to rotate around or stay in posture, as a lot of people will call it, basically this spine angle it's called reverse spine angle, would be when it's towards the target. Kind of a proper loaded position. You can see he's really loaded over the inside of his right foot, the guy in the blue. Whereas if you look at the guy in the red, with that stand up, there's a big sway, which we'll talk about, which will tend to roll to the outside of his foot. So whenever you think about squatting, I know we talk about a lot here, in-house squatting, kind of screwing your feet into the ground, or deadlifting, or even a lot of the single leg exercises. The more you get that big toe to grab the ground and kind of screw your foot in so that your knees are kind of driving outwards. If you think of like butt burners or any of the sideways walks where you get the big burning on the side of your hips, that's the reason we do those, is to try to help you kind of feel, being stable on the ground and engaging those hips in the proper way. So hopefully that makes sense there. So then we got sway and slide. So as I alluded to, this is obviously the guy in the red here is exaggerating on the I guess the left side of the screen there. The swaying, which is crossing that red line, and his backswing, and then sliding is kind of going really far through, on the follow through. Now there's some great players who are great sliders. There's some players that have a lot of, do really well going more side to side. Typically we'll see more side to side when somebody can't rotate. So you have to introduce side to side or up and down. So you'll see a lot of the up and down, like in the reverse spine angle. This is a very common one we see with the side to side. So again, the big issue here is going to be his inability to use the ground when you really sway into the backswing. You can see kind of the inside of his foot's coming up off the ground. If you guys do like any of the, think of like a caveman throw or any explosive move, any of the rotary movements, if you hear us kind of always cueing you, load the inside of that foot. Think any of the medicine ball throws, anything like that. The reason is we don't want to see how you look on that sway side. We want to see how you look, the guy in the blue, where he's kind of loaded up over that inside of that foot. Because that's going to give you the best ability to really drive towards the target. And if we talk kind of kinetic forces, or how well you push into the ground, that's going to give you the best option or opportunity there. All right, so we have reverse weight shift. So this usually goes hand in hand with reverse spine angle. So reverse weight shift, you would see when you get that reverse spine angle, you'll tend to see kind of a lot of the load kind of goes towards that left foot or the lead foot. Now there's, depending on the swing philosophy that you abide by, if you look at more of the force plates, I'm getting, and we as a team are getting to look more at those. There's different people who are right foot or left foot dominant. So there's some people that I work with who I actually don't mind them keeping all their weight on their lead foot, because that may be their lead leg dominant. That may be their dominant leg, and they may be a big vertical player. And so the more load I have on their dominant leg, the more force they're actually going to be able to create, which means more speed. Now, if you go the reverse weight shift here, as you see to the left, with that spine angle up, the issue there is going to be that low right back when he comes back down to impact. So it's a matter of, I think weight shift with the spine angle is no good. If you're more of like a stack and tilt player, you're more to the left side, that isn't necessarily a bad thing, as long as we don't lose spine angle going the other way. Because if you end up in this position, if we go back to the reverse spine angle, kind of same position there. The difference is he doesn't have a club in his hand here. Then basically both of those positions are going to predispose you to having some issues in that low right back. It just increases a lot of compression forces. So Donna, great question. How do you identify weight? Basically which leg you're dominant with. Simple way. So if you're in-house on we have the jump mat, we can just look at, vertical leap on your left leg, vertical leap on your right leg. And you can act on the super technical side. If you're using a force plate, you can actually see how many pounds per inch you can, how much percentage wise relative to your body weight, how much force you can create right versus left. And you can actually look at the quality of how quickly, or the rate of the force development. So if it's a really quick spike, you're very explosive. If it's kind of a long, slower one, you're not as explosive. So that would be kind of the most scientific way to do it. Medium would be kind of what we have here. You just get on the jump mat, jump as high as you can. We see how high you go right versus left. The really low tech solution would be just, you could do kind of a broad jump. So on one foot, jump as far forward as you can, and then the other side, jump as far forward as you can. Or sticky note. We have a sticky note here. steal one of Alex's. So if I use kind of the sticky note kind of right to the tip of my fingers, reach as high as I can, put it up on the wall, grab another one, then jump and stick it up, and then just measure the difference between the two sticky notes. That would be another kind of low-tech at-home way to determine which leg may be more dominant. That's only going to tell you dominance in the vertical plane. But for golf, but isn't that just develop strength versus dominance? No, so actually as you get stronger, you'll always maintain neurologically you're going to be a little bit stronger. So for most right-handed players or right-handed people, left leg, think of like if you kick a soccer ball, you tend to plant on that left leg. Basketball, you tend to jump off the left leg for your right-handed layup. You just tend to see there will be typically a dominance. Now, some people have a bigger difference right to left than others, but there usually is definitely a dominance in both. And then you can strengthen both to increase both, but there usually will be a difference right to left on both. Great questions, Donna, as usual. Loss of posture. So this is, again, similar to kind of standing up out of posture. We're going to go through kind of all of the different swing faults, guys, and comparing them to the limitations. So I have a list of all the different limitations we'll see, and then we'll come back and we'll kind of marry these two lists up in terms of if you have these limitations, these are the swing faults you see. Goal of this is just to make sure kind of we're clear on what terminology we're using. So if you drew a line across the guy on the left, across his shoulders, they'd be pretty flat like mine are right now, as opposed to being tilted. So when you lose posture, you tend to stand up, get a flat shoulder plane, and then you'll tend to see, you can see here the early extension on the right, where he's kind of coming forward up off of that red line. So that's loss of posture. Hanging back is going to be down through impact, not getting to your lead side. So simply named, you're hanging back, you tend to flip the club through there. Over the top, so this would be, if you look at the bottom of that red line on the angle there, taking the club back along that path, and then if you come up and around over the top of that, generally a pretty left club path, a very steep angle of attack. Chicken wing, so you can see the scooping or the breaking of the wrists forward at impact, and then obviously the left elbow kind of breaking and not necessarily kind of holding through and rotating around. That has elbow, wrist, and shoulder issues written all over it. And then casting, early release scoops. You can see on the right the exaggeration of the scooping. And then casting, you can see that angle. Basically, that club is kind of pointed out. It's not almost vertical. Ideally, if you look at someone like Gary Woodland is a player with extreme amount of lag. Like his shaft would actually be vertical or actually angled back towards his head at that arm position on the guy on the left. So if you kind of lose that head out away from you, you're going to lose the ability to store a lot of power. So that's a big technical source of power loss for a lot of players, but also associated with an inability to really drive the hips first, or lack of internal rotation, because you can't drive the centrifugal force of the hips moving through and that club just dropping down. All right, so that was a quick overview of the Big Ten. So there's 10 big physical limitations that I see with golfers. The top 4 are kind of the more common ones, and then kind of in terms of the ones that would cause more swing faults. Now we start talking about like glute trigger points or hip flexor mobility. Those obviously are very common problems that many of you can attest to, but those will tend to cause more pain, or it's not necessarily. Those are kind of things that pop up as a symptom and will tend to cause symptomatic pain issues. They won't necessarily cause or drive a physical, like a swing fault. So we'll dive into these. I always put this slide in, just the not top physical limitations. I've yet to meet some. I'd say probably 1 out of every 10 people actually has tight hamstrings. For most people, it's just a movement issue, not understanding how to hip hinge. The low back is is very rarely the actual cause of the problem. Usually it's the low back that ends up just taking on the job and responsibilities of everything else that isn't doing its job. And so that's why you feel the pain in the low back, particularly the hips. You get a lot of glute trigger points that refer there. Rotator cuff, very rarely the actual issue. It's going to more so be some tissue limitations in terms of how well the shoulder can rotate. And the knees, wrists, and elbows are never really an actual limitation. They certainly get beat up and can be a source of injury, but they're never usually the actual limitation. So, for instance, I had a guy on the web tour with a thumb and wrist issue, and it was because it was on his right hand. It was because of a left shoulder mobility limitation. Basically, he wasn't able to get around, so his club, he was having to come back really far, placing a ton of stress on his thumb and wrist. So we were dealing with a wrist injury on the right, but it was from a left shoulder problem. So those are the types of connections you tend to see more with wrists and elbows than an actual limitation that's causing the problem. All right, so as we go through these, you'll see that with each physical limitation, kind of the key here will be that if it's green, that limits, so hip internal rotation, for instance, can definitely be a direct causator of 2 through 6. So reverse spine angle, swaying and sliding, reverse weight shifting, loss of posture, and hanging back. Those all can be directly linked right to hip internal rotation. If you do any of those 2 through 6 and you have a lack of hip internal rotation, there's probably no way you're going to stop doing it unless you fix your hip internal rotation. If it is orange, so you see like the over the top, casting, scooping, chicken wing, those are obviously upper extremity limitations. Those can be related to hip internal rotation. So if there were no other physical limitations, but except for the hip rotation deficit and your casting are coming over the top, you certainly can make the argument that if you can create better internal rotation, that'll create better separation or kinematic sequencing, which we'll go over in a few slides. And that will allow that club to drop into a better place, creating a better impact position. If you see red, that means that this limitation will not have any impact on that at all. So having a lack of hip internal rotation isn't going to impact your address posture in terms of S or C position. So if that doesn't make sense, let me know, or if you have specific questions about any of the swing faults, and by all means, let me know. The bottom picture in this slide is how you would do this test at home on yourself. So you can see there I'm about 45, maybe a little bit further in terms of my shin angle. If this is 0, that would be 45. That's sort of what you're looking for to be able to accomplish. If you're in-house here, guys, we obviously lay on your back and we test it for you. But if you're curious how tight your hips are right now, that would be the simple way to test that right this second. So T-spine rotation. So not going to be a direct causator of necessarily anything, but can be involved in pretty much everything. So that's what makes the T-spine somewhat challenging from a diagnostic standpoint. So you can see here that I have the club behind my back. That's we should see 60 degrees of rotation. So if you think kind of halfway is 45, 60 would be just beyond that. That's what you're looking for with those knees staying together. So as you're sitting there right now, if you don't have a club, you can just cross your arms on your shoulders. We should see at least 60 degrees is what we'd like to see. And you're also looking, not only do you get to 60, but also what's the symmetry of it. As asymmetry is also a negative component that we don't want to see. And actually increases chances of injury when there is a asymmetry there. So again, T-spine rotation not necessarily going to impact address position. So this is the big one that will impact that address position. That's pelvic control and dissociation. So picture doesn't necessarily do this justice, but so I'm going to back up here. So if you can see, if I'm here, can I keep my hips still while I'm rotating my torso? So I'm disassociating or separating upper body from lower body. And then can I rotate my hips without my upper body moving? So this time you'll a lot of times see hula kind of side to side. You'll see a lot of knees, kind of this sort of movement. We want to try to avoid those. We want true hip rotation. But if you can't do that, it definitely can impact. What it's saying is there's some improvement necessary in kind of your pelvic control. And it isn't directly going to impact any of these other elements. Definitely, there's a lot of people out there who argue this is like the most important thing to address. A lot of the times when you address this in combination with think of like a lot of the activation drills that you'll do in your workouts, think of a bear crawl or a bear position where you're on your hands and your feet and trying to be stable through your spine, and kind of lifting an arm and a leg, all the anti-rotational stuff. That will address a lot of this, but you certainly could make the argument theoretically about pretty much 2 through 10, but definitely could impact your ability to be able to move your pelvis back and forth for sure. All right, shoulder external rotation. So the simple way to do this one at home is just standing elbow here, and how far can you rotate it back? You should be able, if this is straight up, you should be able to get it back beyond straight. Now this one, definitely if you lack here, definitely will be, particularly in your trail arm, so right-handed arm for right-handed players, it kind of lead to that position at the top of the backswing. Just think casting, scooping, chicken winging, particularly on your lead arm. You'll get to here if you can't externally rotate to release the club. So definitely a lot of impact on the upper body or upper extremity ones. It can have impact in 2 through 6. Not going to impact your posture at all. This would be an example of the web.com guy I was telling you about, who he was lacking here. I tend to see the shoulder lacking, such as with him, causing more issues in other areas, particularly in golf. So definitely an area, if we have back issues or something along those lines, this is the one we definitely obviously always will look at, because if you lack here, you're going to try to compensate in other areas. All right, so then we have balance. So the general idea is you should be able to stand on one foot for at least 10 seconds. It definitely can impact swaying, sliding, hanging back in particular. So if you have really poor balance on your left leg, particularly let's say you had a total knee replacement on one leg, your balance is not very good, or you had plantar fasciitis or something that has impacted that leg in terms of its strength and its ability to function, and it's kind of has a deficit relative to your other leg, you will see basically a preference in the body where you'll avoid shifting to one side or the other. So you won't necessarily totally load up on the right leg if you've got a brand new knee necessarily, or the left side or the lead side, if that one's been replaced or you've had surgery in that leg, let's say, or an injury, you're going to be very cautious about getting to that left side. That's why you see a lot of the hanging back, or you'll see a lot of the standing up and whatnot, because there's a lack of an ability to use the ground, because there's a fear that it may hurt, or if it does currently hurt. So you'll see more standing up, a lot of upper body driven movements to try to create speed and power, as opposed to really getting into the ground. Neck rotation, this is a simple test. You just rotate and try to touch your chin to your collarbone, without lifting up or opening your mouth. Basically, lack of this is not going to cause 1, 7, 8, 9, 10. It definitely will cause 2 through 6 again. So you can see 2 through 6 are very much impacted by hips, T-spine, and neck. 7 through 10 are very much impacted by shoulders. So this is a great example of this one was basically I had a guy who wasn't getting enough turn according to his instructor. And so they were working on shoulder turn, shoulder turn, shoulder turn. And when we actually went and evaluated everything, he actually had like 80 degrees of spinal rotation. This is after 2 laminectomies he'd had. But his neck only moved this far left. So he wasn't turning all the way because he wouldn't be able to see the ball. And the golf instructor was trying to get him to keep his head still. And so he ended up going like this, and that was causing other issues. So definitely check the neck. It's not a very common one. As you get over 50, it definitely becomes a little bit more common, but by far the least common of all of the rotary deficits, by far. So hip flexor mobility, this is an easy one you guys can do at home, or you can do it at the table if you're coming here. You just hop on the table and do this test like the guy there. And basically when you pull your leg up, you should see the other leg, basically that thigh parallel to the ground, and then that leg be, that knee be anywhere from 45 to 90 degrees bent. This one definitely can impact posture. So if your hip flexors are really tight, when you go ahead to get in posture, you can see it kind of, if your hip flexors are tight, they'll pull you into this position. It'll be difficult for you to stay kind of neutral. You'll kind of drop into that position. So they're very powerful muscles, very strong muscles. They tend to get really, really, really tight the more you sit. So that's why we always talk about rolling psoas areas, TFLs, those sorts of areas. That definitely helps with these areas. That was Terry that just walked by, trying not to be in the frame there, but I'll make sure she waves next time she comes by. So getting down to the end here, we got ankle mobility. So this is a big one that's preached by TPI and a lot of other golf kind of professionals. there's really minimal research if you think of how much your knee actually, or your ankle actually bends in the golf swing. Unless you're on an uphill swing, like an uphill lie, really not going to impact much. Potentially loss of posture on an uphill lie, but it's a very common one that's thrown out there in terms of kind of quote-unquote functional movement. In terms of its impact into the actual golf swing, not a ton, but it is a very common physical limitation that we see. More so going to play impact in squatting, in terms of maybe needing a heel lift to make sure posture is good and your spine's not falling forward. All right, so the last one here is the glute trigger point. So this is actually a diagram out of one of the dry needling books that we use. So basically where you see the X, that's where the trigger points are. And then where you see the red, that's where people will feel the pain. So you can see how where the trigger point of the problem is never where the pain is. And you can see very much, particularly with the ones on the right, I actually go down the leg and mimic sciatica a lot. I think the big thing to take away here is that if you're getting like pain or whatnot down the leg and it doesn't go into your foot, the chances are it's your glute. If it's truly sciatica or sciatic nerve irritation, it will go all the way to the foot. So I think the most common always here is the one furthest to the left, where you'll see that low back pain. That's the classic golfer low back pain. Wave, Terry, say hi.
Hi.
She loves being on camera. All right, so those are the physical limitations, and those are the relationships to the different swing faults. Now what we're going to do is going to take you through kind of a little bit more application of it. So this is the kinematic sequence. So if you look at your screen here, you'll see kind of the red icon that looks like hips. The green one looks like the torso. The blue one is your arm, and then the red or the brown at the top would be. Actually, I can draw. Let's see if I can make this work. Oh, that didn't work. All right. Let's see if I can draw on it. Seeing if I can draw on this here. Cool. There we go. So that one right there is your hand. There's your arm. There's your torso. And there's your hips. Okay. And you can see this line here. That is the start of your downswing. This line here, kind of just inside, just before that brown line, that is your that's impact. And then I think that's that line there. That should be follow through. So basically, as you start, let's go here. So as you start kind of in this area here, that's all your backswing. So each element is kind of moving in the negative direction or below. So this line here is the 0 line, kind of coming across. It's not really a straight line, but that should be straight. So that line is let me see if I can make that straighter. There we go. So this line here, kind of that black line, that's your 0 line. So basically when the different color lines, when they cross that line, that's when that body part starts to move towards the target. So we'd like to see that, you see this red line kind of where it crosses here. Let's see, right there. Where it crosses there, that is where the hips have started to move towards the target. Okay, so let's clear everything off in here. So that's where, and then you can see, each one. There's your blue, and then your green, and then your arm, and then your hand come next to there as well too. So basically, what we like to see is that hips go first, torsos go second, arm goes third, and then hand goes fourth. So from ground up. And then where you see each of the icons, those are the peak velocities for each of those body parts. We like to see them from left to right, same thing. Hips, then torso, then arms, and then hand. So basically you can see the red line here going up is the furthest left. That tells me that in an efficient sequence, the red line or the hips are what's creating most of the power. And then you can see as it hits the peak with the red icon there, then kind of that starts to decelerate and get slower, and kind of everything else piggybacks or kind of slingshots off of that till you see the torso peak, and then you see the arm and the hand slingshot. And you see everything's kind of working together, almost like if you whip a towel as you kind of pull one part back, the next part moves forward. All right, so then we have, so this is what I did here is there's an example of a client where I had some kind of before and after videos. And then you can see, let me see. Oops. So you can see on the left, you can see how much more loaded he is into the inside of his right foot. The one on the right, he's a little bit kind of taller. You can see even just the club angle, there's much more lag on the one on the left. He's actually getting a little bit to his right side there. As he comes through, you see on the left, so this will be the before picture, he's actually kind of, everything's kind of together, straight up and down. But then as you get, the one on the right, you can actually see the hip separation. You can just see how open those hips are here relative to the shoulders up here. Whereas here, kind of everything's kind of in the same plane of motion. So what that looked like, so this, let's see, here we go. Sorry, I got the right order. Yep, so this was the actual first, that first swing when he was not separating really well. So you can see, and we'll use these numbers, I think this makes it a little bit simpler, but you can see his transition sequence was correct, kind of 1, 2, 3. But his peak sequence, you can see kind of right here, where that green is. Let's get that arrow back. Right here. You can see how that peaks before his hips do. So that's the 2, 1, 3. So ideally, from a peak standpoint, we'd obviously like to see the hips go first. So then if we look at his after, now we start to see, now that green has moved, and now we get the 1, 2, 3, which is what we're looking for. So that's where he's starting to work, and we'll go through kind of basically improving his ability to rotate into his hips. That actually was the guy with the neck issue, improving his ability to rotate his neck, and then teaching him how to use the ground. We've made a huge change in terms of, you can see his speeds here, 298, and then you can see 305, from 475 to 487, and 1588 to 1525. So that equated to him, when we looked at close speed, that was about 10, a little over 10 yards. So you can see kind of how the sequence changed as we changed his body, which is ideally what we're trying to do here. All right, let's take that transparency screen off. All right, so I think this is, the importance of like the test retest that we always do with all of you is it doesn't take very long, but it gives us a ton of information. It doesn't necessarily tell us the whole story, but and it isn't necessarily going to predict pain, but it does help us to kind of understand how what you're doing in your golf swing may be impacted by what your body is or is not able to do. So red flags, if at any point you've seen this and when you've worked with us, if there is pain or recent surgery during any of the testing, obviously that's something that we address first. I'm not worried about performance if you're hurting because your motor patterns are going to be totally changed. So just a quick review in terms of how you can address or test each of these your own. So that's your hip rotation. You're looking for it to be greater than 40 to 45 degrees. There's your trunk rotation, seeing if you can rotate at least 60. That's what you're kind of looking for there. Big thing, keep your knees together. A lot of people like to open those knees up, and that's cheating. Third is the neck rotation, getting the chin to the collarbone. And fourth is that shoulder external rotation in posture is the big way I really want you to look at it. And can you get that, if we look here, see if I can get the drawing tool back on. So if you look at the line of kind of the forearm relative to the spine angle, you want that forearm to be greater than the spine angle. So you want it to be greater than, I lost my arrows here, that way, than the spine angle. All right, and then we have dissociation. So that was the one where I stood up and could I move my hips without moving my shoulders? So those were kind of some big ones there. So this is a neck rotation deficit. So this is interesting kind of start to the top. You can see, just looking at the swing, it's very difficult to see just by looking at somebody's swing where their limitation is. I tested this gentleman, so I knew exactly what it was. That's actually back at our humble beginnings at Hillendale Golf Course there. But he had a huge neck deficit. So swing-wise, it could look like that. Swing-wise, shoulder rotation deficit, if that looks like your impact position, that would be one thing we definitely want to make sure is cleared. If it is cleared and you're still swinging like that, that's then when we could say, hey, there's no physical reason for you to do that. That's something that you need to be working on with your swing instructor. But that is something that's going to put you at a very high risk for elbow, wrist, and particularly left shoulder injuries. Trunk rotation deficits. So he had a really, really bad trunk rotation issue. So he makes up for it with some decent hips and decent shoulders. But you can see how he kind of ends up swaying. Kind of his whole body is like right on that end red line there. And you can see on this picture on the left how he kind of he locks his right leg out to try to get even a little bit more of rotation. There's opening up. That's a hip rotation. You can see he doesn't move into his right hip at all. He just moves laterally. You can see his foot kind of popping off the ground on the inside of his trail foot there. So I think that's the big thing with these deficits as I kind of scroll back is, other than, if somebody does this, you can say, hey, you might have a shoulder issue. But just because you see guys or girls on the range looking like this, you can't diagnose a physical limitation by looking at a swing. You can predict a swing deficit or a swing fault by looking at the body. So it only works one way. You certainly can pick up some ideas in terms of what to do, but you definitely can't go from I see somebody swing, they do this, and so therefore they need to do this exercise. So how are we doing on brain waves? We doing okay? If for those of everyone who will watch this on the replay, if you do need to take a break, this is a good time to do so. But for all of you here, we're going to champion on here. So what I would do, I think it's just fun, find 3 friends and screen them and see like how they do compared to you, and share the information with them, and hopefully you can help some of your friends, playing so that they don't get hurt. So there again, those are basically the big 5 there. And Donna, I know you have more brain power than anyone, so I'm not worried about you. All right. So some of the advanced testing would be some 3D analysis and more performance-based testing. So those of you, obviously you guys all work with us as part of the community here. So you've all done the seated chest pass, the vertical leap, the shot put. Those are the big 3 that we found, in the research now of over 800 golfers at this point that have the strongest correlation to club head speed. Seated chest pass, that's where you're sitting down and throwing the ball as far as you can. That's testing kind of your upper body push power. You have your vertical leap, which is your vertical lower body power. And then you have your shot put right and left, which is more of your total rotary power. And what we're starting to see is where we've progressed into using the ballistic ball, which is actually looking at the velocity of the ball, the medicine ball as you're throwing it. We're actually starting to see that while most people throw it a little bit shorter on their off hand, so if you're righty, your left hand would be shorter. What we are actually seeing is it doesn't necessarily mean that the ball's moving slower. A lot of people, it actually moves faster. So they're actually, what our hypothesis is, the offhand is actually more of a coordination, and the rotary test may be more of a coordination test and predictor of if you can throw it really well both ways, that you're better athletes and you're people with more coordinated power. And when we talk about kinematics, then your hips moving first, your torso second, hands third. That really that's to a degree coordination. So when you do a medicine ball throws or rotational drills, kind of going lower to upper. So the other ones we do are the anti-rotational testing. So you guys obviously like the Kaiser test in-house. If you're working with us online, you probably don't have an anti-rotational element there. But that test in-house is proving to have actually a very high correlation to the shot put production. Not necessarily club speed, which makes sense because anti-rotational core strength is a strength measure compared to club head speed, which is a speed which is a power measure. So and strength is an element of power, but it doesn't bring to light any of the speed elements. And obviously, we look at swing speed. That's the kind of where the rubber hits the road in terms of performance from a how much power can you produce standpoint. And then with the latest research we've put out, which everybody should know watching this, you should know kind of what your percentiles are. And we had test week a few weeks ago. If you haven't already, the yellow folder is by the cubbies. Go look at your sheet. But you'll see kind of what percentile you're in for your age in each of these groups. And what we look for is, if your power numbers are 90th percentile and your club speed is 25th percentile, you're somebody who has more RPMs kind of right now. You got more firepower under the hood. And that may be something like overspeed training or more nervous system work or how to use the ground and driving off of a more dominant leg. Those may give you big bang for your buck right now. If you're the flip of that, club head speed's 90 percentile and power numbers are 25th percentile, you're probably swinging as fast as you possibly can right now. And the only way you're going to swing faster isn't with new equipment, isn't with technique. It's going to be getting your strength and speed numbers up higher. So you're somebody who that's going to be kind of your bread and butter of what you want to work on. Kind of the third category is when it's all pretty balanced, then we would take kind of more of a balanced approach. So hope everyone got some lunch here. I thought this was a funny picture. So if you do need lunch and you're watching this, pause, go eat lunch. All right, so this is going to be a little fun game here. So before we get into it, they're basically golf performance. I want to be really clear, is a supplement to instruction, is not a replacement. If we do our job correctly on the performance side and screening and making sure you can move well, it should make you and your instructor's job easier to achieve what you're looking to achieve from a performance standpoint on the course. And basically, we should be able to take all of those individual results that we get from all the testing we do with you and then kind of build it into a program so that you do get better every test week, which historically we tend to do pretty good with. Sometimes some things may go up, some may go down, and that's why you're constantly reassessing. We're humans and we age. And then I think the big thing, though, that you're starting to see in our industry is a lot of people are saying things are research-based or science-based. All science is not necessarily created equal. So I think really kind of understanding if somebody is making a claim like that with especially a lot of like the training tools that are coming out, look into the research and kind of make an educated decision. If you have questions, I've gotten a couple emails about some different training tools from people that we're working with. Like send them over and I'm happy to kind of have a conversation with you and kind of help you to evaluate if it may be, if what they're saying is, is it rubbish or is it actually like founded in true, like stuff that makes sense, and then kind of how that may fit into your program. All right, so what we're going to do, let me do a little drawing here, okay? So we're going to go, all right, so this is going to be number 1, number 2, number 3, and then we're going to kind of go, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Okay. So yeah, Thomas, definitely. Alex, say hello to everybody.
Hello, everybody.
So definitely, Tom, I can't agree more that I think not all golf instructors are for everybody, and I think getting somebody who's going to understand what you bring to the table is just huge. There's so we don't refer to every single golf instructor around. I think there's definitely some that are better. Tom says hi. All right. So what I want you to do, if you got a piece of paper or just in your head here, you see kind of that if we start from the top left, kind of 1, 2, 3, the next row is 4, 5, 6, and then the next row is 7, 8, 9, 10. I want you to make a list of kind of what you think is true golf performance and what you think is just kind of golf-ish, kind of, I guess, mainstream. It looks like the golf swing, so it should help. And then we're going to... Joe Stedman does get it, Tom. Very much so. He's one of the good ones. All right, so I'm going to assume you guys are quick thinkers, and you've gotten that down. So number 1 on the top left, the guy with the medicine balls, basically that would be golf performance. I think the challenge is in terms of how is it used. So I think med balls, all the research on medicine balls, they're too light to be true power training tools. but definitely you can use them on the speed side of things, which is why we tend to keep them a bit lighter when you use them here. And really working on sequence. So sequence coordination, I think it's a great tool for how to use the ground in a fast golf-specific movement. So that's going to have good transference to the sport. So definitely golf performance. Number 2, so hopefully you got that one right. Number 2, swinging on 2 balance discs. Tons of research. I actually just wrote an article on simplyfaster.com on instability training. If you want to go check it out, go check it out. But that explains much more in depth in terms of why this is golfish. Basically, when you stand on an unstable surface, you totally change the mechanics of the musculature and coordination that you're using. So doing a sport-specific task on the surface that isn't the surface you play the sport on is stupid, basically. Not going to transfer at all. So that would be definitely golf-ish. Number 3 is Rory doing a hex bar deadlift. Any of you guys that work out here would know that that is golf performance because we do it here. It's a great kind of hybrid between a squat and a deadlift, working a lot on ground reaction forces, driving vertically, screwing the feet in, driving up. So definitely kind of 1 is performance, 2 is not, 3 is. Number 4 is standing on the half foam roll, making golf swings. Again, would be golf-ish. Be similar reasons for number 2. Number 3, a box jump is actually the higher the box, the easier the jump is on the nervous system, that is. So basically, if you look at that as the guy's peak height, he's only has to absorb about probably 8 inches of landing force, as opposed to if he stood on the box and jumped off the box, then he'd have to absorb 30 inches of force. So multiply that times body weight. So that actually is one of the starter ways that we will look at kind of vertical thrust. For those of you who don't jump, so we don't typically do a ton of jumping with our kind of 40 and older crew. That's where we'll use more slams, caveman throws. We still get the high vertical forces that we're trying to train, but we reduce any risk of injury or knee issues or those sorts of things. So that's performance. Number 6 here. That would be performance to a degree. It's probably a little, not necessarily from a power standpoint. We actually will do some of these kind of reverse slides. They're more for a little bit of kind of feeling, using the ground, driving it with the low body. A lot, honestly, for balance in terms of can you be balanced in a dynamic reactive setting. The snatched on the bottom left here, number, like I said, 7. That's the most powerful move you can make in sport. One of the most powerful moves you can make in the weight room. Obviously, we don't do necessarily. There's so much technique involved with that, but there are some golfers, our higher level pros, that we will do Olympic-based lifting with. So that definitely is a performance element to it. And then you have obviously number 8 here, standing on a ball. Dustin Johnson was featured on I think it was Golf Digest, or Golf Magazine, doing this. Don't do it. There's disaster written all over it. And then you got the last 2 here, kind of the band here on the right at number 10, and then you have the single leg rotation. I just want to make a distinction that there's a lot of things you'll see on Instagram and social media, particularly in the golf fitness world, where people are standing on one leg and doing rows, and that you're not going to develop strength with those exercises. They're not necessarily bad exercises, but I think there's confusion, and a lot of the posts will say, hey, we're developing strength for golf. All you're really doing is it's a balance exercise, because you're not going to be able to pull heavy enough load that challenges you physiologically to create a stimulus to actually get stronger in terms of building more musculature, creating more force. When we're talking club head speeds, how much force can you produce and how fast can you produce it? While balance certainly can be a limiting factor, I think it's important to differentiate between number 9 here with the guy on 1 foot with the rotation. That is a balance drill. Totally, fully, that is all it is doing. It is a balance drill. You're not going to get stronger doing that drill. You may get a little bit of balance, but that is totally balance. On the number 10, so I guess for number 9, that you could call that golf-ish if people are trying to sell that as kind of a strength exercise because it looks like the golf swing. Honestly, it's more of a balance exercise. And then number 10, they're using a band. Again, not going to produce enough force or load to be productive from a powerful or a speed standpoint. That would probably be a little bit more of a feel in terms of loading, maybe driving up through the lead leg, that sort of a thing. So the snatch, great question, Tom. the full snatch, so actually there's a lot of research out there that when we look at the reason we would do an Olympic lift is to create maximal vertical thrust or vertical power. The more force you put into the ground, the more force you're going to get back out. There's been a number of studies that actually have looked at just doing a hang high pull, so where you just come up to the chest and then drop the bar, compared to the full clean or the full snatch. And the power numbers in some of the studies, you actually can create more power just doing the pull. And the challenge or the reason why we wouldn't do a full snatch would be just the technical time it would take to teach somebody to do that. It would just, they're training to play golf, not necessarily to lift competitively. It's powerlifting, right, Alex? Olympic lifting.
It's snatching.
It's snatching. I always get that and powerlifting mixed up. Alex is always my corrector on that. I was going to say Olympic, but I thought I was wrong. I think that's where teaching the full lift is very technical. We actually will do with more of our younger players and our professionals. We just do the pull. As you actually when you look at force plate studies that have been done, you actually create the same or even maybe a little bit more. It is a good thing she's here, Tom. Tom says it's a good thing you're here for me. But that's why we'll do those Olympic liftings. It's a way to get a lot of load into an athlete where they have to create a lot of force through the ground. All right. So hopefully you guys aced that. If not, I'll tell Alex she has more education she has to do. All right, so training throughout the year, as we wrap up here, guys, is going to be September. This is generally based on kind of a North Carolina schedule. September, kind of October, that's when we'll tend to be more in the movement correction, kind of recovery from a lot of the golf that was played all summer. And that may go to October, November, depending. There's a lot of member guest stuff that happens in September. Then you get to kind of November, December, and into January. That's when we go to kind of general physical prep, where that's really working a lot on just kind of building a good base, kind of building more strength, more reserve that we want you to have for the next season. And then we'll get into February, April. That's where we get to more of the sport specific. So, for saying we're over 40, a lot of the triphasic based training will start to take place kind of November, December. That's what we found through the research that we've done to be the most productive in terms of club head speed gains for golfers, adult golfers. And then as we get to kind of that February, March, April, that's where we start to transition to more of the lower rep schemes, the faster, more explosive moves. And then obviously May through August, that's when you're kind of in your in-season programs, where we're not trying to kill you necessarily. What we're trying to do is keep your power outputs as high as possible and keep the volume relatively low because you're playing a lot more. So that should be, in general, kind of how you look at your year. So in speed development, obviously, we talked a little bit about the Olympic variations. Plyometrics are bigger, jumping and those sorts of things. The other one is going to be the overspeed training, which obviously we did those 2 studies on the overspeed, on the speed sticks. And that's where that can be a huge gap or huge help, particularly for that person who has club speed at 25 and power numbers are in the 90th percentile. That nervous system could be the big gap there. So those are definitely some ones that you could use with that. Let's see. The videos aren't going to load. Oh, man. Had some good videos from when we were at Athletic Lab there. So that's not going to load. But and these are just some more examples. You guys are all pretty familiar with. The bottom one here is kind of a big caveman throw, some Olympic variations. I apologize if the videos didn't load. All right, so last 2 sections here. First one is the medically complex golfer. Hopefully this doesn't look exactly like you. But, I think any sort of joint replacement, or any surgically intervened, in terms of the back, the shoulder, neck, hip. You're starting to see a lot more hip interventions, just because the technology is there to do more surgery. So you're starting to see more hip problems come up. I think the big thing with any of the issues, if you have pain or anything like that, let us know. And hopefully we can help you figure out a way to conservatively fix it. But if not, having surgery is not the end of your golf career. There's lots of ways to work around that and kind of work through it. So, if you are dealing with any of those, just let us know. That's what we're here to help you with. Obviously, aches, pains, I think that's kind of the same realm. The earlier, the faster we can catch something, the easier it is to fix, and less likely it progresses to the surgery sort of stuff. I think, particularly, thinking nutrition, hydration as you get older, I think dehydration is a big issue that we see in the 50 plus population. And just kind of, I think sometimes as you get older, I think I know I see it a lot where some people are thinking that they can get away with the stuff that they got away with when they were 20, where they could go play 18, do a workout, do 2 classes and only drink, like a glass of water, a bottle of water, and have a snack in the middle, and have no other food all day. Your body's not going to be as resilient as you get older or mature. So definitely, I think pay attention to what you're feeding yourself and drinking, and we can help you kind of navigate that as well on the course and off. For junior golfers, I think there's a huge thing. If you guys have seen 4 12-year-olds lined up, 2 will look like they're growing facial hair and could be in college, and the other 2 will look like they're in 3rd grade. There's a huge difference in terms of chronological age and biological age. So I think understanding where they are in their development is going to be critical for what type of training is going to be the most important for them. Club fitting is huge from a performance standpoint in juniors because they're constantly growing. I think the other thing for adults, as you're getting faster and as you're improving, pay attention to when's the last time that shaft may have fit you 10 mile an hour ago. It may not be the right shaft for you now. So I think definitely be aware of that as your body changes, both youth and older. But I think also with kids, you have all the other stuff. For women, starting their menstruation cycles, you have growth spurts that are occurring, coordination issues. And then obviously with kids, it's the big tournament schedule and the amount of load, the amount of time they're playing. That traditional kind of training calendar I showed you a couple slides ago, that's easily done for adults, not as easily done for kids. That tends to cycle in and out of season much more. So last, just to finish here before you guys, if you have some questions, go ahead and start typing them in here. You have about probably 5-10 minutes left to answer everything you got. This is just a cool, progressional photo of one of our juniors that we had. And basically on the left is where she started when she was just working with her swing coach. And then by working with the swing coach together to kind of understand where she was trying to get her to, and also getting this young lady's body to where she needed to get it. You can obviously see a huge transformation from the left to the right. And she plays Division I golf now, and she's just a great kid. So I think a lot of things are really possible when you approach it from that assess, reassess, and you understand how the things that you find are going to be connected to your golf swing or not. I think that's sometimes more important. Find what is or isn't. So this is, if you want to start reading just reading some of the research, this is just some of the research that's out there. I can obviously, this is a little bit of an older list. I can certainly direct you to the more recent stuff if you're interested. So anyway, that kind of concludes the first one of our community educations. As always, I'm asking kind of how'd you like it, how'd it go? We had about 40 or 50 of members and whatnot, kind of reserved. So a lot of people are going to watch this on the replay as well too. If you have ideas for topics that you want to learn about, please stop in and see me, shoot me an email, or tell any of us really. So we're going to basically kind of rotate through and have a different team member do these each month. And so stuff that you want to learn, we want to teach you about. So we'll also obviously give you updates on all the research and whatnot that's coming out. We actually are going to be putting out, I'm just putting the finishing touches on our the 2 super speed studies that we did, the full report on them. So it'll be right up on all of the research on overspeed training across all sports, but then also the specifics of what the studies found. So Tom, this is my progression now with Joe. It's just the reverse of those pictures. So I think as you get older, I think there's it's called rate of force development. So what you actually will start to see is going to be decreasing the elasticity and kind of the separation and more of kind of a one-piece swing with a little bit of a longer takeaway, which gives you more, think of like getting on the highway, a more of an acceleration time down through the ball. So you just, as you get older, you lose that elasticity element. That's just physiology. And so what you start to see with some of the, let's say 50 plus players, that making changes to those positions is actually very, very helpful for them. And I think Tom, as you said before, like it's not a one swing doesn't fit everybody. And we're certainly not looking for every single player that we work with to look exactly like this girl did. So any other questions? You're welcome, Donna. thanks for hanging out with me today. Hopefully you guys have a good weekend. I'll stay on another minute or two if anyone's got any last minute questions here. If you are watching this on the replay, I'm going to make sure I put in the ability to put in questions so you can send them to me. The MTRX app regarding the sequencing of your body. I don't know the MTRX app, Brian, but glad you hung out with us on your lunch hour. I'll have to take a look at that, and I will get back to you. Cool. I'm learning something too. I'll have to look at that. Maybe next time we chat, we'll chat about it more so. But I'll have to look at that. I'll look that up, and that may be another presentation we do. So. All right, guys. Well, if you don't have any other questions, I said, Brian, I'll look up that MTRX app and get back to you on that. But other than that, I think I got everybody's questions. So I will see you guys next week. We're going to go film some, getting ready for our new YouTube channel that we're going to be putting together for you. So have a good weekend, and I will see you guys later.